Hi, I'm a Mordechai Torchiner, and I've been asked to provide something of a primer on ventilator triage as it applies in this time of the coronavirus pandemic and from the perspective of Jewish law. Honestly, there are far greater names than mine who should be doing this, but on the other hand, they're pretty busy. So I'm going to just give a little bit of a digest as well as some links in the description below to longer classes where I've discussed this at greater length. I may yet devote a full-length class to this in the coming days, depending on how Pesach preparation goes. But medical professionals are facing difficult questions. Two patients are brought in simultaneously. Which one gets the only ventilator that remains? Do you remove somebody from a ventilator if a new patient comes in who seems to have a greater chance of survival? Patient who comes in seems to have poor chances of survival even with the ventilator, and you anticipate that you're going to get other patients in who may be able to make better use of the ventilator. But if you put the first one on, it may be ethically difficult to remove the first one. What do? Do you decline to use the ventilator for the patient in front of you, anticipating its use for somebody afterwards? So, like I said, these are difficult and challenging questions. And this is really just going to be a brief primer. So principle number one, not all, but virtually all halachic authorities are agreed that once somebody is on a ventilator, we can't remove them. The Mishnah says, Ein docha nefesh mipnei nefesh, we do not push off one life for the sake of another, and it would be considered pushing off a life, an act of murder, to take somebody off the ventilator if they need it. So that's a basic principle. Principle number two, if two people come in simultaneously, we do have methods of prioritization. Unfortunately, those methods may lead to conflicting results. Three methods. Number one, immediate need. If one of them needs the ventilator now and won't survive without it, then the other one could actually hold off. Then Rav Wosner in the Shevet Halevi, for those who want to look it up, Chelek Yud, Kuf Samach Zayin Aleph, says that the one who needs it now has the priority, and again, that also seems to be something that is fairly agreed upon. However, it's not the only means of doing the triage. A second approach is effectiveness of treatment, meaning if one patient is likely to survive due to this treatment, the other patient is not likely to survive even with the treatment, we prioritize the one who is likely to survive. We have to define survival. What if they'll survive a day, 5 days, 10 days, a year? But that's the basic principle. It's found in the Mishnah Berurah discussing saving people from a fire and choosing to save the one who is more likely to survive. Rav Moshe Feinstein brought it in the Igros Moshe, Choshen Mishpat, Beis, Ayin Gimel, Beis. And then the third method of triage is to choose based on value to the community. And many sources are marshaled to support this perspective. First of all, text. We have a Mishnah in the Masechta called Horios, which presents a hierarchy for saving people. And even though there's a lot of controversy surrounding implementing that Mishnah, how one would implement it, whether it's supposed to be implemented or not, one of the principles that seems to guide that Mishnah's prescriptions is choosing people who are of greater value to the community. Rav Hershel Schachter pointed this out in a recent ruling regarding ventilator triage. Also, we have legal precedent for the idea that you put the needs of the community first. Rav Shaul Yisraeli pointed this out in Amud Hayamini Yud Zayin, saying that, after all, the Torah gives leaders the right to take the nation to war for the sake of the community. Even though individuals are going to be harmed in pursuing that war, clearly the needs of the community override the needs of the individual. And from a philosophical standpoint, the community is viewed as a supersized individual of greater worth than the standard individual. The Chasim Sofer presented this in Choshen Mishpat Kuf Ayin Zayin. Rav Kook made this point in Mishpat Kohen Kuf Mem Daled Tez Zayin. Rabbi Dr. Avram Steinberg records it in Harfua Kahalacha, Volume 6. It seems to be a well-supported approach. So this may lead us, for example, to prioritize healthcare workers over others. It's the same argument that Rav Chaim David Halevi and others, well, actually, no, it's not the same argument. I apologize. It's similar to the argument that Rav Chaim David Halevi and others bring regarding ransoming soldiers who are taken captive. The idea that this is necessary for the community, Rav Chaim David Halevi and others point out also that this will boost the morale of those who are endangering themselves for the community because they know that they'll be taken care of. I think that argument is also part of the general value to the community approach. So we have three different triage approaches, right? Based on immediate need, based on effectiveness of treatment and based on value to the community. And that can create a fundamental problem. What do you do if two of these methods yield different results? What if patient A is more likely to survive, but patient B is of higher priority for the community? What if patient A has a more immediate need than patient B, but patient B is more likely to survive? So these cases require real knowledge of the specifics involved in each case. How likely is it that patient B wouldn't survive? How likely is it that the one who's not as necessary to the community wouldn't survive? And the doctors would really need to consult authorities based on the specifics of the case and, frankly, the time they have to be able to do that kind of consultation. But there is a concept of triage for this within Jewish law. And the third and last principle, right? Our first principle was don't remove people who are already on the ventilator. Our second is that we have methods for prioritization of patients. And then third, if a low priority patient comes in, I hate to say low priority patient, that's a terrible thing to say. That's the term. That's the situation. If a patient of lower priority comes in, we generally will still treat that patient right away without considering that a higher priority patient might be brought in next. Rav Eliezer Waldenberg, a giant in the field of medical halacha, said this in Tzitz Eliezer, Yud Ches Samach Tes Daled, and many others did as well. You take the patient who is in front of you without considering that a higher priority patient might be brought in next. However, what if we hooked up the lower priority patient and then higher priority patients come in? Now what do you do? So in his recent tshuva, in his recent response, Rav Hershel Schachter addressed this and contended that that would be grounds for issuing a DNR order for the patient who is hooked up, so that we wouldn't do further things for them. Because, he writes, in the time of a pandemic, we could have anticipated that higher priority patients would come in. They're really considered simultaneous. Not to the extent of removing the lower priority patient, but to the point of not extending that patient's life in order to be able to treat others. So again, three principles. We don't remove people. Number two, we have methods of prioritization, perhaps the method of going by immediate need. Whoever's immediate need is greater. Whoever could survive longer, the effectiveness of the treatment, or the one who is of greater value to the community. And finally, we treat the patients as they come in, such that if a patient who is of lower priority comes in first, that patient's going to get the treatment without considering that a higher priority patient may be brought in next. These are really scary issues, and again, should really be addressed by those of greater knowledge than me. May Hashem guide and protect those who are charged with implementing triage guidelines. Thank you.